Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Transgender Show. I'm your host, Emily. Very excited tonight for our guest, Robin. Robin is a guitarist, singer, and songwriter from Atlanta, Georgia, and performs and releases music under the name Robin Shakedown, what we know her from on Instagram. She is currently coming off the release of 2021's EP entitled Bullet Baby and Cartoon Eyes, which draw inspiration from social changes caused by the pandemic and personal changes associated with transition, respectively. So, welcome to the show, Robin.
Thank you so much, Emily. It is so good to be here. I really appreciate you having me on the show. All the standard intro stuff, from start to finish. That was a really good introduction. I enjoyed that. Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Even with the false starts, it's all good. Yeah. No. It's absolutely wonderful to have you here. And some people might not know that you've been kind of helping us on the back end of the Transverse, behind the scenes a little bit, doing some stuff. And hopefully we'll have you involved in some more. Robin's also a very good writer. So she's cleaning up some of the junk that we put together and making it into actual documents that sort of make us look professional.
That's the idea. Absolutely. I try to make everybody look as professional as I can.
All right, so let's go ahead and jump into all this. The mods are taking care of chat and your questions. We will get to all of your questions and comments. Keep them coming in. We'll get to those after the break.
And also thank you to the mods. We wanted to always recognize mods because they are busy behind the scenes doing the things that you don't necessarily see.
Thank you so much for reminding me to give mod love. The mods are absolutely wonderful, are absolutely loved, and
it's
yes,
like the town team.
Do not get enough credit. So yes, thank you to the mods. And Kari says, "Ooh, you got the older clickety clack Apple keyboard."
Oh yeah, it's it looks like a clickety clack Apple keyboard, but in reality, it is some cheap thing that I think I got online that is designed to look like an Apple keyboard. At least it's wireless.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's nice.
Right, I think it lights up. Yeah,
Ooh,
look at that.
Fancy. Look at you.
Thank you.
My eye is giving me crap.
Thanks for noticing, by the way. I take a lot of pride in my keyboards. Although I'm not a keyboard enthusiast. There are... Oh, God, okay, look at that! Look, perfect. Beautiful example. See, that's a real keyboard. That's a real Apple keyboard, I think, isn't it?
You know what? And I had... wow, this is getting way off track, but I had one of the really cool flat stainless keyboards with the real thin keys, the nice, you feel super modern and spacey when you're on that one, and the T quit working. And when
what word has a T in it that you can think of that would possibly be requisite to you having a T key?
Yeah, it wasn't a big deal for me. I mean, my show's named The Transgender Show, and my organization is the Transverse. So other than that, yeah, T's weren't very important for me.
Wow. Oh, that blows. I'm so sorry, Emily.
Well, yeah, it's just now I got to go back. Luckily, I was able to go back in time, and I had the historical keyboard here that I could use. I could dig up, and we're there. Yeah, Kari brings up a good point. I probably just overused the T with my show naming alone. All right, folks, let's try and wrangle this in and turn it into a show here. To start and just kind of set the tone with the basics here, how do you identify and what are your pronouns?
My name is Robin. I am a transgender woman, and my pronouns are she and her.
Awesome. Got the basics out of the way. My favorite question to start with, how did you choose your name?
Well, it was super easy, Emily. I took my dead name, I tacked 2 letters to the end of it, and I called it a day. No, it was that was the to me it seems like all the neural connections were already there, in place. My head snaps when I hear that phoneme already. So why not just kind of build off of that? So it seems like the logical thing to do, and I did.
Okay. Was there any part of that, so I've heard lots of people, we've interviewed lots of people on this show. Was there any part of that just kind of holding to what your parents had given you or some of the familial parts of that?
Sure. I don't have a lot of contempt for my past, personally. And of course, that'll change for, millions of people, depends on who you are. But I liked who I was, and I like who I am. And, there were changes that needed to happen, and I didn't see anything wrong with necessarily almost paying homage to that. Almost, giving that part of me a little bit of honor, showing that, like, hey, you're the person who taught me how to play guitar. You're the person who taught me everything I know about how to interact with people, about what masking is, about, what it's like to try to have a normal experience. Everything I know about that, I know because of you. And that person, yeah, judged me a little bit, and judged me a lot, actually. But I think that's something that we all struggle with, and there's a lot of self forgiveness that has to happen in that regard as well.
Well, yeah, and then you bring up a really good point. In that, did you have any kind of struggle? The kind of typical trans narrative is that you feel wrong in your body, you hate your body, and like you alluded to a second ago, you sort of hate that previous identity. I found in my story, I didn't have any of that. So that made it harder for me to accept the fact or believe the fact that I was trans, because it's like, well, I don't follow that narrative because I don't really hate the dude. It's just not the right thing for me.
Absolutely, and I think that's what I tried to be getting at there was, yeah, there's no reason, I think, to necessarily follow that narrative. There's no reason for you to hate the person you were in order to know that you're trans, in order to know that, hey, it might be better if I try to express myself a different way, or if I, feel like I'm not expressing myself authentically enough. Like, it's just change. It's not necessarily one is good and one is evil. It's hard.
Well, you seem to be somebody who's extremely confident in who you are and in your transition. Do things like we talked about in the pre-interview, okay, but are there things that, like we talked about in the pre-interview, the general sentiment that is going on around the country, that appears to be going around the country, and the laws and all the anti-trans legislation and book banning and burning and all this stuff, does that affect your belief in yourself in your transition?
That's an interesting question. Let me think about that for a second, because I know that right now, I know that after having paid attention for the last however long I've been transitioning for, that kind of thing has definitely taken much more of a forefront in my mind. Like, that kind of thing is much more important to me. When I see it, I can actually put myself in the position of these real, genuine victims who are not getting the support and the help that they need. And that, yeah, pisses me off, pardon my French. Hey, let me interrupt here and say, what is the profanity like on this show?
I try and keep it professional myself, because I'm trying to set a standard and conduct myself professionally. But please, by all means, if you prefer to and it works for you in the moment, go ahead and swear. We do not care about that at all.
Sprinkle them in as I see fit.
Go for it. F-bombs aplenty. Do it.
No, it's and now I can't even remember where I was. Where were we?
Just talking
about legislation. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, being able to actually put myself into the position of these victims. Yes, I can actually see myself there. I can actually, like, and it seems very kind of self-centered. And I think a lot of trans self-misogyny centers around self-centeredness, as convoluted a statement as that sounds. I think a lot of the reason I'm able to get mad at this anti-trans legislation the way I was never able to before is because I can relate to it now. And, it's weird to have gone from someone who... Let me give you just a little bit of background here, because it might help with this perspective a little bit. I'm one of those people who did not follow that narrative like you also described. I did not know, I didn't have any inkling at all until I was, good and developed as an adult, and I had all this stuff baked into me that says, trans people are weird and trans people are not relatable. And in a way, I can almost, I don't want to say empathize because it's wrong what they're thinking. I just didn't know it at the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's, I can see where they're coming from, and I know that getting through to them to fix that is so much more difficult than it seems like it should be.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's like we talked about in the pre-interview quite a bit about how those narratives, especially when it comes to the biblical sense and what people are interpreting the Bible to be saying, there's a clearly defined right and wrong. And as humans, we tend towards the easy route. It's just something that's more comfortable for us in general. And I think when you've got something to look at like that is a clearly defined right and wrong, it's really easy to say, okay, that's it. I'm done. I don't need to think about that. I can worry about other things because this is set for me and all of that. And I think that's something that happens for us as well. We adopt this doctrine and say, okay, this is the way it is. And that was one of the big struggles that I had when it was time to decide to start transitioning. Again, I don't fit the narrative. It's wrong. It's weird. And, I'm scared and I don't want to be that because that is a negative thing. Does that line up pretty well with the way you felt once you identified as transgender?
A little bit into the identity and thought about it a little bit. I don't necessarily agree with the sentiment that religion views it as a right or a wrong way. I do think that there are many, many, many people out there who are religious in some way, who are Christian or who, are Muslim or they're Jewish, and they are totally down with trans, and they can justify the fact that trans people exist, even in the context of their religion. So I don't necessarily think that there is a right way and a wrong way that's put forth in Christianity. And speaking to that, I did grow up in a Christian household, like many of us did, but it wasn't, at least in my mind, I guess, it wasn't as restrictive and oppressive, I think, as a lot of these hardcore Christian trans people grew up in. Mm-hmm. There were gay people in my church growing up. There were gay elders, and there were no trans elders in my church. That's the thing. There were never any trans people to look up to. There was never any kind of representation of trans people other than just this caricature and this either this deceitful or this pathetic looking caricature that's all there was. Yeah. There were no real world examples of it.
So when it came time, what was going on for you, like in your head? What was the situation when you came to understand that the identity of transgender was what applied to you?
It was a weird thing. I recognized something on a stage that I liked, and I recognized something in performance that I liked, and I don't consider transgenderism to be performance. I do consider transgenderism to be a condition that affects a lot of us. But just seeing someone on stage, and I think the specific concert that I saw was Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers in 1981 or 2 in Rockpalast in Frankfurt, Germany, or Hanover, Germany. I watched this concert of them performing Shout, and to see someone on stage exist so authentically and without any kind of regard for like what the audience was thinking of them was, I think, what inspired me for the very first time that, hey, there is something to you that you are missing. There is something to you that you are kind of repressing, or you don't understand exactly what's going on. And that probably happened when I was 15 or something. And after that, it just kind of I just, it felt like being gay, but you still like girls, so you're not gay and you don't know why.
That is a great way to describe it. Yeah. And I really like that too, that you're watching someone who is just being themselves. And again, it's something that triggers something in you. It's just like there's a jealousy and you're like, but a jealousy of what? like
Right, exactly. Like, I'm trying to be as authentic as possible. I think this is me. I'm like, shit, everything that I've lived with my entire life has told me what I am. I am this gender. I am white. And of course, yeah, I am white, but I am going to be an engineer. I am dead set on this course, and this is all that there is. Transitioning was never ever presented as a real, genuine, legitimate option. And I feel if it had been, well, there's your trans regret. That's what we're all fighting against every single day. That's the root of dysphoria,
mhm.
I think. But that got off track. I'm so sorry about that.
You're fine. I'll get us back there. So at that point, when you identify, I guess, yeah, there's still probably a little bit more to mine there. In at what point you've told us sort of an egg, not a maybe a cracking moment, but it sort of started to soften the shell.
Very,
And
very, yeah, a very softening of the shell. The
um,
cracking moment.
but yeah, what was
If that's
what
what
was going
you're going
on?
for.
How did you come to the point of accepting the fact that okay, I am transgender?
I wrote a bunch of words down one night, and they were organized in an essay format. They were not just words. But I got this overwhelming feeling. Here, let me turn my amp off. I got this overwhelming feeling one night. I remember it was probably shit. I'd say I was probably about 26 years old. That hey, there's like weirdly just more to life than what you're experiencing right now. There's something that has been building inside of you in all of your combined experiences. There's like some kind of wave that's been building. Go figure out what that is. And so I picked a location, and it was the Majestic Diner down the road. And I drove out there. It was probably about 10 p.m. One night, and I took my laptop and I just started writing and writing and writing. And I think after a couple of hours, I just kind of came to the conclusion, and the writing went everywhere. It was just free writing to get whatever was on my mind off my mind. And it, at the end, said, according to the internet, I'm transgender. But according to the internet, Paul is dead. So I don't know what to think. And that kind of sat with me for a couple of years until I heard this is the stupidest story. I'm so sorry, Emily. I heard Kate Pearson sing the song Mr. Sister, and I thought, wow, that gives me the same feeling that one concert, that one Rock Palast concert did in 1985. I mean, the 1985 concert. I was not alive in 1985,
Mhm.
but the hearing Kate Pearson sing, she's from the B-52s. She's got the best vocals of any singer, if you ask me. Hearing that said to me something, and then I thought about transitioning, and I was looking up at the sky one night, and I was writing a lot of music, and I came inside and I said to my girlfriend, I wish I had been born a girl, and I don't know what to do about that, and I don't think I want to talk about it right now. And then we didn't talk about it for like several months.
Wow.
And then George Floyd got murdered. And COVID happened. And the world shut down. And what do you do when everything shuts down and everybody's angry and outside and rioting, and they shouldn't be outside because COVID's happening, but at the same time they should be outside because race is important? You do a lot of thinking. And so I did a lot of thinking and I did a lot of journaling and I said, fuck it. You get one shot at life. I'm pretty sure I would always regret it if I never gave a try to transitioning to see if this is what I'm missing. And so I did. And that itself is a big, long process and story that I'm sure we'll maybe get to. But yeah, that was pretty much the story from thinking I was a total and complete cis dude to not being that.
Yeah. Wow. So you kind of mentioned that some things maybe at 15 did, now that you've gotten to a place in your transition and you accept yourself and all of those wonderful things, looking back, do you have any breadcrumbs? Are there some things you can connect the dots to see like, oh, there were hints back when I was 11 or when I was 3 or whatever.
Sure. I mean, my best friend, and this is one of the first things I noticed, there was an unbroken string of best friends who were females from preschool until like even now. My best friend was always a girl, and I just never put two and two together. And like, I can seriously name it from, like probably a string of 10 of them. Just like, depending on where you are in your life and who you spend time with, but it was always a girl.
Yeah.
And like that never, like, I don't know, it just never seemed like anything was wrong with that. It never seemed like anything was different with that. And there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing different with that. But it is unusual, I think. And when you pay attention to that, in retrospect, it kind of does seem like, look, this is me trying to interact with people who are like me. And you don't see it like that when you're growing up in high school, because there's a lot of people you think you have huge crushes on, and it turns out it's gender envy, or or the other way around. It's like it's very difficult to kind of differentiate the two. So it adds a kind of different dimension.
Yeah.
Do you remember the game? Oh, this might not be appropriate. Do you remember the game? What was it? Marry, fuck, kill.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was.
I think somehow I think I'm old enough to where it seems to have kind of come out after my time somehow, or maybe I wasn't the coolest kid in college, but yeah, I am familiar with it. Yes.
Okay, yeah, no, I remember there was a lot of it was weird, like the roles of, and this is such a crude model for the point I'm trying to get across, but just marry and fuck. Like I feel like there was a lot of like, what's a crush and what's gender envy? That's where that question was answered.
Uh-huh.
Was when you
Interesting.
were wrestling with those two, those two options.
Well, yeah. So luckily I had the camera just on you when I did my little happy dance when you were talking about having a best friend all through your school and starting with when you're preschool. Because I had a slightly more gender correct version of that
Okay.
even muddled it further for me.
Okay.
I had a girlfriend that I called a girlfriend. So like this was my girlfriend, and I mean like a significant other type girlfriend from preschool. And it wasn't until I was in therapy and the therapist is like, why would a preschool boy want a girlfriend? That it kind of clicked for me because you're getting into teenage years and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, I've always liked girls. I've always had a girlfriend. And then you put the question of like, but that's not normal into it. And you're like, oh, I've always wanted to be around girls so much that
Yes.
I had a girlfriend.
Yes, absolutely. And now that you put it like that, I'm thinking back to preschool too. Sure, I had a bunch of girlfriends in preschool, and like, yeah, the excuse was, "Oh, you're such a ladies' man,"
Yeah.
and and shit, I was like, I don't say I wasn't, but yeah, that totally makes sense.
I,
That resonates a lot.
I just remember when that thing started to come up, like you were mentioning that, do I want to be with them or do I want to be with them? Did
Right.
I just say the same thing twice? I
You
did.
did, but
Do I want to be
you
with them or do I want to be them? When
there you
that
go.
question started to come up, that's when my world really started to shatter. And I'm like, wait, why can't I answer that question?
That's really interesting. When did that like start to happen for you?
So I've talked about this enough. So I
I
can share.
know, and I'm so sorry.
No, it's good.
At least for me.
I developed a sort of what felt like kind of an addiction to like forced feminization stories and kind of porn stuff and things like that. And I just came across something that was like that of like, you don't want to be with her, you want to be her. And that just
And
that hit me. And then
that
I
comes in
started.
your mind a little bit,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I started to think about it out in the real world. This was just something I did that I was extremely ashamed of, and whatever. And it was just like, I would think it. I would take care of business, and it'd be done. I'd fall asleep ashamed, but satisfied, and like that was it, right?
But ashamed, right?
Right,
Yeah, it
yeah,
sucked.
absolutely
Absolutely.
ashamed. But then
Oh my god.
when I started to see that question pop up in my brain in real life, when I would see somebody, it was just like, what the fuck is happening?
Cool. Cool. Yeah, that sounds a lot. Yeah, that tracks.
So then, okay, so we've talked about kind of like, I maybe you did sort of answer this in your writing exercise there that you did in the cafe, but how did you come to terms with the fact that you were transgender once you finally accepted it? Like, were there some keys to that?
Oh my god. That was a very, very long process in itself. That one started with Oh my God. That one started with starting a private Instagram to kind of test the waters, to kind of I'm trying to think of it was like I was using Instagram as a journal to write completely candidly and to have nobody follow this Instagram. But to be posting to it as though I were not worried at all what anybody would think about it. So I would daily kind of just like post what I was thinking, not even necessarily like shameful thoughts or anything like that. Just a very, very kind of matter of fact, I allowed myself to be myself. And after several months of that, I started to like see somebody there. Like I started to see an actual identity begin to form. Like it's so difficult to describe, Emily, and I know that you know this,
Hmm.
but people who may be watching this, who may be interested in this, it is impossible to truly describe what it feels like to form an identity out of nothing and then to step into that role. Like you can make as many movies about it as you want, but and actually, I shouldn't say it's impossible to describe because there are some movies that do a pretty good job. But unless you feel it, and this feels like gatekeeping, but let me rephrase and say that in my experience, I never ever ever would have imagined that it is what it is.
Hmm.
I never would have imagined that it felt like this.
Well, and that's really interesting that you described that, especially after what I just said about that question popping into my head in real life when I'm looking at somebody. There's sort of, for a lot of us, I think there gets to be this like looking glass moment where you're kind of creating this identity and it's all in fun, and then you're like, oh crap, that's me. You've sort of like just kind of slipped through the glass there, and it's like, yeah, that same thing of like I had this sort of fantasy ideal, and it was fun to play with or whatever, but then all of a sudden it was there in real life, and I'm
You actually
like,
perceive yourself at some point. You look in the mirror and you see that's holy shit, that's not the person who was standing there, however long ago I'm comparing it to was. That's literally a different person, and that is somebody new who I like I've created something that I like and I've become it.
mhm,
It's such a powerful and otherworldly feeling.
yeah. We've got an interesting discussion going in chat, and I kind of want to get your take on this while it's happening. They're talking about, oh, the women and girls that they identified with in shows and movies and things like that. I have kind of an interesting thing. I think it's sort of like basically a dysphoric thing where I'll find myself watching something and I'll be like, I'll realize I'm kind of identifying with the male character, and it's just like,
Yeah,
am I
oh,
doing that
that's
because of experience or because of whatever? And I'll question myself again. Do you kind of struggle with that sometimes?
so god dang lutely. I mean, that is one of, yeah, that's, I mean, one of the things I think that, whenever I view any type of media, whenever the protagonist is male, I'll be looking at it and I'll be putting myself in his position. And I think that's just like what we're like, having been, socialized males and having been grown up in that kind of environment. Sure, of course we're going to do that. But at the same time, also, that's just like what you do as a human, as a person who listens to stories and who experiences media. The reason we enjoy them is because we can relate to the main character. And if the main character is generally male, then we're going to do a lot of relating to males. And that's just what we're going to do. That's how I kind of get my mind around it, at least. But I actually do find myself, on the flip side, being able to relate to female characters and female protagonists as well a little bit better than I was able to before. Simply knowing that, hey, this is not a side character. This is not just, as Hollywood gets better at representing all genders, as slow as it may take, I think there is a corresponding kind of acceptance that I'm experiencing in my own everyday life when I watch movies, of being able to put myself in their positions and relate to them. So yeah, I think, yeah, there is a little bit of dysphoria there, but if I think it's logically, like, you can logic your way around that almost.
Yeah, that's one thing that I've still got to work on, because that's still kind of tripping me up as far as how I feel about myself. Danny says I've never related to the male characters, and maybe some of it, maybe I can kind of give myself the break of I'm relating to trying to be that rather than that's
I can see that. Yeah, absolutely. That resonates with me. I mean, you are, because it's not so much you're relating to the character, I think. I think you're relating to the experience that the character is having. And you know that you are you. Like, you see yourself as you. You have this id that you put in the place of whatever character it is that you're visualizing. And it's just that that character happens to be male a lot. I don't think, I can see where that would cause dysphoria. And that's how I work around it, like I said.
So let's get into some of the harder stuff in your journey. So you mentioned that you told your girlfriend.
I did.
I think you kind of dropped this revelation bomb on her and then said, "But I don't want to talk about it."
It was a bit of a yeah, it maybe a little selfish. I don't know. I wasn't ready to talk about it, but I wanted her to know, obviously.
Well,
And
what a
she was,
terrifying moment, right?
God, absolutely. I mean, we had been together for shit. At that point, we had been together for about probably 4.5, 5 years. This was a long-term relationship, and we had talked about marriage, and we were committed to each other and everything. And like, what does that mean then? Does that blow everything up? Does that destroy your entire relationship? It doesn't have to, because it didn't. Like, she has been, and I know this isn't everybody's experience, but the night that I said, hey, I'm trans, I wrote it on a big sheet of brown parchment paper, and I rolled it up and I put it on the shelf. And she came home, and I was all bundled up in blankets on the bed, and I said, go look at that sheet of parchment paper. And she got it, she unrolled it, and she looked at it, and then she sat down with me, and we just talked and cried and tried to make sense of the world for the next, like, 8 hours, like, all night long. And just her willingness to do that, I think that's, knowing that she would do that is what attracted me to her in the first place, is knowing that she was the kind of person who saw past just who I was on the outside, and who liked me for me, and who saw me for me, and who would make every effort to understand who I am and what makes me, the way that I am. And so that first night, there was a lot of there was a giant question mark in the air, but we never stopped talking about it. And I think eventually we just kind of understood each other as two different identities, two different souls, if you will, with all of our gender built up around ourselves as shells,
Mm-hmm.
with all of our masking and veiling and all of that. But at our core, we had built up this relationship whereby we could kind of get through all of that and really try to make contact with each other as these small brown circles. In my mind, I picture us as small brown circles.
Hmm.
That's all we are. That's all our identity is, and everything else is just a shell around it. I think she just walked in. Hey, Marissa, is that you?
Yeah.
Yeah, she did just walk in. Yeah, of course. Welcome to the show. This is Emily.
Hi.
Say hi to the internet.
Hello.
Hello.
This is Marissa.
Hi.
Cool. I'm done.
Okay, good luck. Yeah, but we reached each other, and some say we still do. I don't think the door closes, baby. This is the worst kind of experience.
No, you didn't. You broke the whole thing. The show's over.
That's it.
So, that brings up an interesting kind of thought exercise from a psychoanalysis type of a perspective of, the partners we choose. I'm kind of questioning. I was married at the time. I was with somebody that I was with them before I realized I was trans and started to do some of the transition stuff. And it did end the relationship. And I'm kind of wondering if there's something to that to explore within ourselves as we get to this point of like, the people we choose. It sounds like you chose a person who you knew going in would accept who you really were. You somehow had that intuition. And in doing almost 100 episodes of this show, I've interviewed plenty of people who talk about going into careers or, into the military or whatever, doing things to prove, it's generally transgender women go into a career or something like a military service to prove that they're masculine and that they're manly and they're going to stick with it or whatever. And I'm kind of wondering if there's something similar to that in the partners we choose. Sometimes in that this partner is going to hold me to that, or versus if you're coming from a healthier place, maybe you see and choose a partner that is going to accept you. So how has it been for y'all? You said you kind of talked through everything, just to give a complete picture. Have you all struggled with it at times as well?
Oh, sure. I mean, just like anybody would struggle in this situation. There's just a lot of roles that we have to work out. We have to, like, this is literally creating new identity out of nothing, and trying to figure out how that identity works in with the habits and relationships that are already built up in this other person, in this partner. Like, how do you do that? Is there any way that you can do that with intention, or is there, is it all left up to chance? Is it a crapshoot? And how do you find the balance between what is done intentionally and what is done just by chance? That kind of thing I work out a lot of in therapy, which has been unbelievably helpful through this, just to get someone's perspective who doesn't have a dog in the fight, so to speak, who can just like hear you out and listen to you and talk to you and offer advice when you need it and offer an ear when you need that. That's kind of how we've navigated it, with the help of therapists and by trusting each other.
That's wonderful.
It's been wonderful. It hasn't been all wonderful, but yeah, it's been wonderful.
It's a relationship. It never is all wonderful,
Of
but
course not.
you add this extra thing, and relationship is all about change and adapting along with each other through that change that you're both doing. And now
Absolutely.
This is a great change, just a bigger.
Trusting each other. It's honest to God. It's trust. It's a shitload of trust.
So then, what were some of the challenges that you had in coming out, and who was the hardest person for you to come out to?
Let me think about that one. And I did think about this one in the pre-show interview a little bit. And I came up with a bunch of different answers at different times of the day, interestingly enough. I think the biggest challenge to coming out was taking myself seriously, was coming out to myself first. And I think that is true with any queer person in general. You know, to grow up in a society where queer is not normal, yeah, you have to show that you're not normal first, and you have to accept that you're not normal first. Then, then I think the next hardest would probably be my parents. You know, and I think that's fairly relatable as well. Your parents are the people who think that you are their little kid. You know, they know who you are. They are supposed to know you better than anybody. And by coming to them and saying, I'm not who you think I am, you know, I'm not this person I've been presenting myself as for the last however long I've been alive. There's a lot of self-questioning. Am I crazy? Am I going insane? Are my parents going to think I'm insane? And then furthermore, after my parents think I'm insane, are they going to still love me or not? You know, that's a giant challenge and a giant hurdle to get over in itself. And unfortunately, that one is kind of dependent on your environment. That one's just dependent on what kind of parents you have growing up and what kind of parents they had. You know, are they willing to break any kind of cycles, any kind of generational cycles that have been going on forever? You know, there is a huge generational cycle of trans non-acceptance and queer non-acceptance that goes back centuries. So every family that has a queer person in it has to get over that somehow. If they're going to remain a family. That's a huge challenge.
You said something that struck me, and this keeps happening tonight. Maybe I'm just in the mood for it, but maybe I'm in the brain mode where I'm open to it or what. But you said, trying to be normal. Essentially trying not to be queer. You know, you spend your life kind of, and that's an interesting thing to think of, is we spend so much of our time trying to be normal and thinking that that's what it is. We're trying to be normal, that we don't even realize that what we're trying to do to be normal is to be a gender that we're not. So it gets kind of lost in the fact that we're trying to be normal. But
it never feels right.
Yeah.
So it never feels normal. And that's so hard to explain to people. You know, it just comes off as cliched a lot. You know, when I find myself, in these mental situations where I'm trying to explain to people like what it's like to be trans, why you should accept us, other than just being a decent human being. This is a way to relate to us. How do I explain this to you? And every single time I try to explain it to somebody, or every single time I try to come up with some kind of words to say, they are always just the same stuff that was parroted to me when I was cis. And I know the effect that it's having on them. It's just bouncing off. It's just like, this is just crap that trans people say. And that's very frustrating. And the crappy thing is, I didn't realize that was frustrating when I was the one causing the frustration.
Well, it's so funny. It's such a hard conversation to have. And I was hoping that the argument, that I could kind of turn the argument back on, let's just stick with parents here, that, sure. For example, I don't understand this. I don't understand why, you're doing this or whatever, or what this is. And it's like, yes, that is the key point. Like,
I know you don't understand.
Yeah. There sort of is no way to understand it unless you go through it, and that in and of itself is the thing that validates it, that makes it a real thing that you should believe in, because it just has to be experienced. The fact that you don't understand it means that, yes, you are a cis person. The fact that you don't understand it means that you feel right in your body that it's the correct thing, and you have to understand that if I don't, that's the case. It should feel like what you're feeling, and it doesn't for me. So
obviously something is not right here, and you're not going to experience that. We're limited to our own senses. But at the same time, Emily, how do we justify the almost, of course we can justify it, but like faith-based Christianity, taking it back to religion, is a belief in God because you believe in God, basically. It is, it's, I don't want to call it circular logic because I almost feel like I have to call trans acceptance circular logic in that case too. And like, it's, when you think about it too much, you stop being able to take action because you can always find like a little thing to get caught on. You can always find a little snag,
Mhm.
and I think a lot of nuance is lost in the conversation these days because of that. There's just a lot of the same phrases getting repeated over and over that have the exact same phrase that you repeat back to it to kind of to counter it. It's there's no discussion happening at all. And shit, that's a theme that's been going on for decades. Not just with trans things, but with issues in general.
Yeah, it's such a tough part of the human experience that unless you experience something directly, you can't understand it. You can't feel that way. And so it makes it so hard for people to grasp these concepts. And like I said, I was trying to make this point of like, well, the fact that you can't grasp it is the validity for it because, you know, clearly, and I guess what it is mainly is fighting back against that notion that you've chosen this. You've made a conscious decision that I'm just going to do this or I'm going to try this. And that's what I'm trying to debunk. But by saying that is like, no one would on a whim try this. But I guess it's sort of a,
You're gonna think about it a lot first.
yeah, I guess it's sort of justification for their thought of like, well, you must be crazy then because nobody would.
Nobody, because nobody would do this. Exactly. No, but just thinking about it, just the act of talking about it, just the act of trying to get these ideas out into the open so that we can all try to relate to them. In the beginning, it's what propagates this trans non-acceptance. It's what propagates this notion that if you're trans, you've all of a sudden decided it without thinking about it, without having to logic your way through it or to come to kind of any self-acceptance, and it looks like you're crazy.
Mm-hmm.
So that sucks.
Wow. So we're a little over. We're almost to halfway through the questions. I just looked down at the clock and we're almost to the hour, and I feel like we've been moving along at a pretty good pace. It's so crazy. I guess we're gonna go long tonight, folks.
Lightning around them.
So, on the other side of my last question, did you have anybody that supported you in a way that you weren't expecting or surprised you?
Most people, honestly, most of my fears were unfounded about coming out. So personally, I come from a musical background, and I've spent the last 10 years or so just kind of hopping around bars and playing a bunch of gigs and doing the whole North Georgia bar scene, that whole kind of thing. And you meet so many people who you kind of on first meeting them expect are not going to be very accepting of who you are when they find out who you are. But recently, actually, I think back in February, I went to an event that was being put on by a lot of people who I knew pre-transition, like I call them my pre-transition musical family. And, they really were. They were my musical family. They raised me on how to play music. And then I disappeared for like a year and a half while I transitioned. And then back in February, I showed up and I said, "Hi, it's me, and this is who I am now." And there were like some conversations, but everybody loved it. Oh my God. Like I was flabbergasted by how ridiculously overall supportive these people are. The times they are a changin', as Bob Dylan put it. Mm-hmm. And I've noticed that I think people who are transitioning right now are in a much, much, much better place to transition than people who started maybe 10 years ago were. Like,
It,
much better.
even despite all the pushback and the backlash that we're seeing right now with the legislation and things like that, it does feel like it's a better time.
Weirdly, socially, it's better. It's
Mm-hmm.
getting more accepted. You're starting to be able to see the shitty, evil legislation that's being made much more easily because it contrasts so much more to the general background, to
Very
the
true.
general feeling that the public has. It's no
Very
longer a joke.
So you talked about starting an Instagram that was hidden and was where you developed your identity.
Yes.
So the two questions that I have spawning off of that were, when did you find community that resonated with you and that were people like you,
It
and
was, yeah.
and what took you from that quiet private account to being somebody who's so publicly trans, so public on Instagram?
I can easily answer that. It was, I'm going to plug She Shreds Media right now to the Transverse. She Shreds Media is a female and gender nonconforming centered media outlet focused on the guitar player and the musician. And back in January of 2021, I hopped on Instagram and I saw that they were doing this challenge, the One Riff a Day challenge. And I thought to myself, hot damn, I'm a guitar player. I know, I can build this identity starting from a template of a guitar player. And I grabbed a guitar and I made a public account and I started posting these riffs. And I started finding other gender nonconforming and female guitarists who would interact with me. And I was like, holy shit, y'all accept me as a legitimate person. Y'all don't know who I was. That's crazy to me. And that's really how I was able to take myself seriously for the first time. And we talked about Jen Does Stuff before. That's where I met her. And that was the first time I was really able to find community and accept myself for who I was, because these other people did, and I was so thankful for them. She Shreds Media.
Awesome, a good plug. Let's take a bit of a big left turn here and go to a question I like to describe as our very ethereal question, because it gets to the root of what you feel about transition. What does transition mean to you on a deep level? I think we've stumped her.
It's not so much you've stumped me. It's there's a lot of places you can go with this. And some of those places are not good places to go, and some of those places are good places to go. That's a tough question. Have you answered this question? Do you have an answer for this question ready?
Damn it. Oh, busted, just like that.
I want to throw you under the bus first.
Well, see, unfortunately, I almost feel like I can't answer this now because
you answer it every single time.
I don't. I've asked so many people it, and I've heard some of the good ones, and it's just finding a way to truly accept yourself on a deep level for the first time is sort of kind of the best of what I've gleaned from people. I guess the thing that's resonated the most with me.
I was absolutely thinking that, but then, that would mean to a cis person who is very truly and totally cis, when they self-actualize and find out that they are completely the person who they've always been, and that's awesome, then transition, that doesn't mean transition to them.
Mm-hmm.
Transition doesn't mean that to them. So I'm trying to think of a good definition for what transition truly means. And yeah, I guess to me personally, of course, that's a very safe answer. I think it means to be recognized for the things that I most want to be recognized for, I think is a way to put it. And now that I say that out loud, I'm not sure I phrased it right.
Well, no, and I love that because now I can turn it back around and I can poke you a little bit and try and find
What do
out
you want to
some.
be recognized for?
Yeah, what are some of those things that you feel? Because, transition a lot of the time, especially when you talk about medical, is a lot of external changing. So, in that, I kind of want to probe you a little bit more on what is it that you feel you're able to put out there now in a different
Sure.
way than you were before.
So the recognition for traits and qualities comes from a lot of introspection and getting to be comfortable with yourself. And of course, I actually wasn't even considering physical traits. I was thinking like the way that you present yourself, the way that you carry yourself, the way that the way that you interact with the world. When people see this and they recognize these traits that you excel at, when that's truly what you want to be putting out to the world, when you really, really want to come off as the world's most compassionate person or the world's most, passionate person, like, what's the best way for you to express that? And if you have to transition in order to feel that you're fully expressing that, then that is what transition means. I think it has a lot for me personally to do with how I interact with the world. And maybe the reason for this is a lack of introspection, but less for me to do with how I interact with myself. I almost feel like I know myself.
That's great. And that ties into the next question I wanted to ask because, again, you have exuded a very strong aura of being very confident in yourself and confident in your transition as you've gotten into it. But on the contrast of that, what were some of the key fears that you had going into it and through it? And how have you overcome those?
Becoming caricature. That is the biggest fear that I've had since day one, is to come across as caricature. Because that's all I've ever seen of trans people in the media, pre-transition. Everyone who was trans was a joke. And I know that there would be that kind of propensity to think of me as a joke as soon as you hear that I'm trans. I feel like that's kind of the same as it is with anybody who is presenting themselves in any way, regardless of trans or cis. But for the whole trans thing, especially, yeah, the threat of caricature is the biggest threat in my eyes. And the only way I've found to overcome that, and this was taught to me by a very, very dear friend of mine on Instagram, who is actually a cis woman and really served as my biggest inspiration for how to conduct myself as a person while I was coming out to myself. She told me that as long as you are confident in what you do and you own your femininity and own your presentation in everything that you do everything authentically, make sure that what you do is the real presentation of yourself, whatever that may, mean, whatever that looks like, you will not come off as caricature because you won't be a caricature. I put a lot of trust into her, and I put a lot of trust into that kind of mantra and into that mindset, and I started to repeat that to myself, and I started to live daily, like, do it confidently, just do the damn thing, and people will see that you're doing it, no matter what it is. They'll see that you're doing it, and that in itself is enough light to inspire people to do whatever they need to do.
How did you get to a point where your voice sounds so natural and authentically feminine? Is that something that you had to work on a great deal?
The fact that you said that means the world to me, because it is something that I spent a lot of time working on. I really appreciate that, Emily. I had a very good vocal coach named Kira at the Voice Lab in Chicago. And she kind of related a lot of techniques to me over several months of training and therapy. And then the second biggest thing would be the YouTube, trans voice lessons on YouTube. A huge plug for Z and trans voice lessons on YouTube. Heat from Fire, Fire from Heat. What an amazing, amazing, amazing channel. If you're ever into looking into trans voice lessons, look her up. And then the third thing would be singing, because singing allows me to do whatever the hell I want with my voice without having to worry about how it's perceived, because I'm singing, God damn it. You know, I can do whatever I want. And then listening back to those recordings, I can be like, oh, I remember what technique I was using during this time. I remember what technique I was using to get this timbre. And how do I translate that into everyday speech?
Oh,
That is what I do on the car ride on the way to work.
I've heard a lot of tale of voice coaching, voice work happening in the car. A lot of parroting, a lot of different stuff like that. Yeah, it's kind of funny because I of course you're probably pretty well trained vocally, and that didn't dawn on me that for me singing is one of those things where that kind of terrifies me. Like that's the hardest thing to do, to try and get to sound feminine and not sound like that kind of caricature joke kind of a thing. And yet also I've found that is one of the best things that helps me kind of dial in my voice, is trying to sing.
Absolutely, because when you're singing, you can imitate things. You can imitate people. You can imitate singers. You can sing something in the style of somebody. And when you're giving a speech, for example, I find it a lot more difficult to orate in the style of Morgan Freeman than I would to sing in the style of Kate Pearson, for example, or recently, Tamar Burke. I've been listening to a lot of her and imitating a lot of her voice, and it's been great.
Yeah, like I said, I think it's a really good technique to try and parrot, to try and sing along and mimic other
Absolutely. Yeah, you can be whoever you want when you sing.
Let's see, what else do we have to talk about? We're way over.
So sorry, Emily.
No, I going back in the edit, I'm sure it'll be the amount of time that I'm talking this time around. I'm really enjoying the back and forth, and adding is what adds time. So you talked about what some of your what your fears were, and that being the kind of caricature, being the joke. Now let's talk about barriers and hurdles that were in your way as you started to transition. What of those did you face, and how did you get over those?
Insurance sucks. That's probably the most concrete barrier that I could find. It's expensive. There's a lot more to it than just medical transition. If that's the way you choose, that's only one way to do it. But that's what everybody thinks of when they think of what the big barrier is. For me, it was good Lord, facial electrolysis. God damn it, it is so expensive. It is like, and you got to do so much of it. You got to do, if you're gonna do electrolysis, you got to do hours and hours and hours on it. And so I'm going for an hour a week, and I've been going for like a year, and like I'm just like starting to see a few results. Like this is an expensive endeavor. There's also all of the legal fees associated with if you want to hire somebody to help you change your name or change your gender on legal documents. There's ridiculous lawyer fees that factor into that if you want to go that route. These were all things that were not necessarily clear at the start. The one that you don't ever really see, because you never view the other side of it anymore, is job prospects and pay for transgender people. It's socially acceptable to pay us less, to put it politely. And that's a dang problem. That's a huge problem, because we're seen as less, but we're not less. In fact, in many ways, we're more. And that's not commonplace yet. That's not the commonly held belief yet in the workplace. It'll be hard to see the economic shift that we are due. Because any way that you can justify spending less money, you're going to do it. It is the same boat. It absolutely is. Have you read Whipping Girl? Okay, I highly recommend that, and I want to plug that too. The Whipping Girl goes into a lot of why feminism and trans feminism are identical. They're not identical, but they are the same fight, and they have the same goals. And just Whipping Girl by Julia Serrano. Read it if you're interested in trans feminist theory.
I'm sorry, y'all. I had muted my mic. You couldn't hear me. She could. What I had asked is, or I'd mentioned is talking about the feminist movement and how it's really strange that there are branches of the feminist movement that are anti-trans, considering that we're fighting the same fight. We're facing the same thing as they are, and they haven't reached that level of equality yet. So it's like we should band together and fight the same fight together. It only makes sense. So that's what she was answering there. As we wrap up this section, I've got three big important questions for you. The first one is there anything that you feel you've been able to accomplish because of your transition?
Through a hugely increased amount of confidence, yes, absolutely. I've been able to kind of achieve a level of social. I can hear Marissa in the kitchen, and it's freaking me out. I've been able to. Oh my god. Yes. I've the confidence. It's gained me a whole lot of confidence in booking and putting myself out there as a musician, specifically. I feel a whole lot more like I have things to say. Songwriting wise, I've experienced things from different perspectives, so I've got this parallax that I can kind of use in songwriting to compare and contrast. Like, this is how you probably see things because this is how I saw things, and this is how I'm starting to see things now a little bit. Like, there's a whole lot that you can do there, songwriting wise and album writing wise, to try and like entice people into like listening to your music. Hey, I've got something to say. Also, I'm trans. Awesome.
It's so funny. I'm just kind of laughing to myself here as I'm thinking of the fact that it's almost would be appropriate to do a trans girl cover of Joni Mitchell's I don't know the name of the song, but that I've looked at Love from Both Sides now, and it's just like the double entendre there.
That actually would be a perfect thing that we can do. Let me write that down. I'm always writing riff ideas down, stealing them from you.
Yes, I wouldn't be able to do anything with it, so please go ahead and write it. I think with some fun little tweaks to the lyrics, you could make a really great trans song there. And we'll debut it here on the Transverse. I'll have to check with my legal team and see if there's any claim we could make towards it. What is your favorite thing that you've learned on your journey, either about yourself or the outside world?
That's related to transition?
Yeah. Oh, just as you've gone through transition, our perspective changes. So it can be from the lens of transition or just from the lens of the world about, like I said, either the outside world or yourself.
Sure. I've learned that, I've learned a lot about blind spots. That's been probably the most eye-opening thing. And I'm sure blind spots come up a whole lot in, when we're talking with trans people and about trans issues. Just blind spots in general are these exactly what they sound like. They are holes in our ability to see our own privileges and positions in society. Like, what... beforehand, before any of this journey had started, and then comparing that now to after I've read a lot of feminist stuff and have experienced life kind of from a different point of view, like, there's a shitload that I wasn't aware of that I was doing that, I wouldn't even have thought of otherwise as being anything problematic, but, like, good Lord, there is a lot that is built in to being the default that we take for granted. That again, you just can't explain it unless you've experienced it, because it will come off as cliche.
Mm-hmm. What advice? Oh, wait, sorry, yeah. I thought you were done.
I could be. No, just how to be polite and how to have a little bit of empathy.
You were pausing for dramatic effect, and I stepped right on it. I apologize.
Not at all.
What advice
good.
do you have to give to young or closeted trans folks out there?
Good luck. And it is worth it. If you think that exploring gender might be of any service to you, find a way to do it safely. Find a way to just read about it and educate yourself and look for media outlets, look for experiences of people and relate to them and realize that we're not so different. And then also think back to the people who are in your grades, who are in your classes, who are in kindergarten with you, who were outcasts. And really, really try to imagine why they were outcasts without putting the blame on them. Because nobody wants to be an outcast. Get some damn empathy. Read up on how to get some empathy. That's what I would give to young people.
That's wonderful. It's another good thing that you learned from your transition. Robin, this has been a wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us.
Emily, thank you so much for having me. It was really great to be here.
Everybody be sure.
To meet you too.
Oh, what's that?
And it was really wonderful to meet you too.
Well, thank you.
For the first time, I know.
Everybody be sure to check her out on Instagram at robin.shakedown. Catch her.
Robin.shakedown on Instagram.
Yeah, all of her riffs and all of her fun stuff there.
Music writing and all of that. It's a great time. It's a wonderful time. I'm a fantastic influencer. That's how you be a fantastic influencer, is by claiming that you are one. And it makes it true. There's that confidence that I was telling you about. If you claim to have confidence, people will see confidence. So check out my Instagram.
There it is. Okay, now we're gonna, I think that was a good enough pause for the editing. We will take our break and come back. It was just the teaser because of the editing thing there. So everybody in the audience, please stick around. We'll be right back with your questions and all of that. And of course, the part that you are most excited about and most want to see, Robin playing some actual music. Actually, as we're going to break, this is sort of the perfect time to give a little tease. Do you want to take us out with a little bit of a riff that I'll cut in the middle somewhere?
I can totally take you out with a little bit of a song. Okay, we're gonna play some. What am I playing? Do a Joni Mitchell song. Yeah, you're probably right. I'm gonna do The Waiting. So this is The Waiting, and this is for you guys who are all waiting for anything to happen, like for us to come back from break. I'm just looking at my levels here, and I'm seeing I'm peaking pretty hard when I play hard. Oh, baby, don't it feel like heaven right now? Don't it feel like something from a dream? Well, I never knew nothing quite like this. Don't it feel like tonight might never be again? Maybe we know better than try to pretend. Honey, no one could have ever told me about this. To say, yeah, 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 yeah. The waiting is the hardest part. Every day you get one more yard. You take it on faith.